Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here as always with my good friend, colleague, and co-host Jim Gurley. And Jim, in the pregame, Jim shared with me some of the deep dives that he went into. He goes into these deep dives not specifically to come up with topics, but they seem to come from that as a byproduct in some of his research. And he happened upon some of the writing and philosophical stances of Carl Jung, and we brought some of those to this discussion in the context of the power of self-talk, and in from our wheel, and the middle of the wheel being the self, and the five areas of life around the self. You know, everything seems to come, Jim, from self-awareness. That's the beginning of the thought provoking process. And then we were just kind of getting into this idea of self talk, and it can be a really positive thing, but I think more often than not, it can be a very negative thing, and it can have a major impact. And what one of the things Carl Jung has done is he's kind of categorized a way of looking at five different categories of this. And he uses the word archetype. We're not really fans of that word, but a type or a voice or some structure, so that the labels that he puts, I think he is attempting to try and make things a little easier to understand, to clarify. So I'm not looking at these as right or wrong, but they're, as you said, they're fascinating. So the
Mhm.
first one, and I can read real quickly, Jim, all five, and then you can come back. I'm not going to read them in depth because it's pretty detailed.
Yeah, let's do that, Mark. But again, just some context to this. As you know, I'm always interested in topics or learnings about um, that are related to our weekly podcast of the Imperfect Men's Club and these five areas that we've identified that we're talking about every week. And it always comes back to the center of these five areas, which is self awareness, number one. And then I started to realize also self talk, because that's the next thing is how we're viewing these five areas of our life, whether we're aware of it or not. And of course, that's um, the relationship that we have with our profession, the relationship we have with others, the relationship we have with money, the relationship we have with the worldviews. And so I found this to be really um, relevant in terms of self-talk and something you brought up, and that was even self-doubt. These are the things that when you're creating something or you're challenging yourself, there's these voices in the back of your head that you hear that are going to either inspire you to move on, or maybe even the self-doubt that often comes into mind. So I thought this was some really good stuff we can learn by. So let's have some fun and break it down.
Yeah, no, it is. It's very interesting, and
Mhm.
the inner voice, the self talk, the inner critic, whatever you want to call that.
Yeah.
It's a powerful voice,
Yeah.
but
So is that what
we
you
do
start off
have.
with reading? Yeah. So you'll start off with the definition of self-talk.
Um, I
Yeah,
can.
I think that'll set things up, and then we'll go through these five areas after that.
It's fairly well. I have here uh, breakdown of what self talk means. Internal dialogue. It's a continuous conversation
Y-
you have with yourself, often without even realizing it. It's both conscious and unconscious. It's a mix of your conscious thoughts and unconscious beliefs and biases. It can have an impact on well being. Self talk has a significant influence on your emotions, actions, performance, and overall mental health. And I think it's significant that it can be either positive or negative. We
Yeah. What
sometimes
I picked
focus
up
on the
was
negative.
self-talk is essentially your inner voice.
Yep.
It's it's the way you talk to yourself in your mind, and it's an internal dialogue that runs through your head throughout the day, and of your thoughts and feelings and experiences. That's, just a high
Yeah,
level, right? It's
yeah,
happening
no,
all
I
the
think
time.
it's all of that. I think one of the most interesting concepts of it for me is that you can be doing this with yourself without even being conscious of it. And
Yeah.
that's where I think maybe the power lies, that when you're really going to go self-aware and you're really going to investigate, it's probably on the unconscious side as opposed to what's obvious to you. But anyway,
Yeah.
so there's five voices, if you will, five types, if you will, ways of thinking. The first is he defines as the good student, and this type embodies the voice of perfectionism, waiting for permission and seeking external validation. It tells you not to launch your course, post your art, or ask for money because you haven't learned enough yet. The second is the silent healer. The description would be this type wants to help, hold, and heal, but struggles to charge for services. It romanticizes struggle and spiritualizes poverty. And that's definitely one we're going to come back to. The third is the starving artist. And this description is this person believes that real creativity must come with pain and that to be authentic, you must suffer. It often sees money as corrupting art. Number four, he calls the invisible one. This type hides its magic and keeps its voice small, believing it's safer to stay unseen due to past experiences of judgment, rejection, or danger associated with visibility. And then the last one he titles the overgiver. This type gives and gives, over explains, over delivers, and overworks. It stems from a place of unworthiness. So, boy, there's a lot there to unpack, as you like to say, Jim. Go
There
for
sure
it.
is.
Have at
Yeah,
it.
geez, like you said, I found myself in every one of these, and wasn't very proud of it most of the time. But yeah, this is clearly something that's going on. And I find it typically when you're, again, challenging yourself, right? When you're pushing yourself and it's getting hard, all of a sudden there's these voices in the back of your head that you hear. And some of these come from childhood. As you mentioned, your coaches, these are teachers, these are could be your mother, your father, your siblings, all kinds of voices that are going on. But the good student one, absolutely a victim of this. Since I wasn't a great student,
Mm-hmm.
I call it, as you know, I refer to the educational K through 12 system as a torture chamber for my mind. So this one probably is a little maybe oversensitive to not feeling like I'm either following the rules or I'm ready. Right? It's holding you back because or you're following the rules and that doesn't apply to, let's say, of course I'm an inventor, so I'm doing innovative things that don't exist, but yet I'm trying to follow the rules where I have to do it in this certain order, and that's just not the case. By the way, that's also the context of this discussion, is how the world has changed, and it's being more authentic than ever before. That's what the world is asking for, is authentic people, and not to let these block your the best version of yourself, and to get over these things and to push it out in the world, show the world what you're building and share it with them along the way, instead of waiting for it to be perfect. Like, things have changed uh, since
Yeah,
he
I think they're
yeah
changing. I think they're changing. I think that when we grew up was a different time in many different ways. And the last maybe 10 years has been a pretty dramatic shift in the way we think about things. But it to me, it's all authenticity. And I
yeah
think that the recognition that I come to every once in a while is the light will shine on everything. You might think you can hide some stuff. You might think that you can not let anyone know how you're feeling, or you might not want the world to know that you're weak, or you can't do something, or you're lacking confidence, or you're suffering from self-doubt. The world's going to find out. You can't hide that shit. And
mm-hmm.
so my perspective on it is that I'm trying very hard not to even try.
yeah
And so not to be egotistic, not to be braggadocious, not to say I'm better than anybody else, but to say, this is me, man.
mm-hmm.
I'm not apologizing for it. I don't feel an obligation to explain it. And I'm happy to talk about it with you, whoever you might be. But to think that I can keep my secrets in the dark, I think that's just not even possible. So why try,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's rescripting, right? It's the shift from seeking approval to sharing your evolution. It is rescripting your thoughts to that. Show your process, be human, be real. That actually builds trust. and yeah, back to your point about being authentic, and of course mastery comes through action, and without taking action and waiting to be discovered or waiting for the perfect time, it never happens. So
You
it's
know, that's such an interesting point, the action piece, because it's
mhm,
really I struggle among other things in my current business with an overload of information. It's
yes,
overwhelming how much
we all are.
information is out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I call that knowledge, right? And I think knowledge is you can get knowledge with the push of a button. I think what we're talking about here really falls more into the category of wisdom.
Yeah.
And I think wisdom is a combination, or one way of looking at it is a combination of knowledge and experience. And
Mm-hmm.
most of the experience that I learn from is mistakes, is getting things wrong, failure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I heard somebody use a phrase the other day. I can't remember what it was, but it's like failure is the deepest, most helpful data repository of learning that exists for man.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
all there. But
It's when you
in
grow.
order to
Yeah.
be comfortable with failure, you got to work through some of this shit too, you know,
No
because you're
doubt.
exposing yourself to criticism, you know.
Yeah. One last thought before we move on to the next one, but it's also allowing yourself to teach as you grow, and sell your insights. Why becoming. So leadership is really about real time. It's not fraud. You're sharing what you know now. You're not waiting for it to be perfect and then um, hoping that somebody won't call you out. There's a bit of an imposter syndrome always going on in the back of our head. Like,
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah. No, I can't remember who it was, but somebody was, it was a TED talk or something. It was like, if I talk to people uh, outwardly, like I talk to myself, I would just be constantly getting into fights with people. You know, I mean,
that's a good,
we're so mean to ourselves. We just
yeah,
really are.
really,
And I would never think of treating another person the way that I occasionally treat myself. It's a pretty
yeah,
crazy thought, you
that's good
know.
stuff though. Yeah. So, all right, number two.
So yeah, the silent healer. Again, this person wants to help, hold, and heal, but struggles to charge for their services. And
Mhm,
they make the struggle romantic, and they spiritualize the poverty of it.
mhm,
Again, I can see myself in this all day. You know,
mhm.
it's like, how do we price our services? Well, that's too little. That's too much. It's like, well, where are you getting that value? How are you assessing the value of whatever that might be? You're either underselling yourself or you're overselling yourself. Where's that happy medium? You know,
Yeah.
that's tough.
Yeah, I think we all have a hard time putting value on ourselves or our services. We talk about this. That's the value of an agent, right? Somebody that sees the value to the market than you trying to establish that or sell yourself. But yeah, I think the silent leader, like somebody's going to discover you, and and then all of a sudden you'll you'll be validated and um, okay to share whatever your thoughts are. So again,
You know, it's
this is a little almost too close as an inventor because you're bringing things to the world that don't exist, and your greatest fear is to fail in public or to be laughed at because it didn't work, and that's a risk. But if you don't do it, you're also dying inside. Like there's these things in you that you have to get out before you're
mhm,
gone, and
mhm.
and it is a big part of our when we talk not about happiness but fulfillment. To be fulfilled, you have to ship it.
Yeah,
You have
it's
to
very
push it out.
interesting when you start considering how much to charge for whatever it is that you're doing. But it really is
Mhm.
the market that dictates that, right? It's the market says, you know, if people are willing to pay this amount of money for this particular service, then that's what the value of it is, you know. So
Yeah.
if you can take that and externalize it that way, it might be a little bit of an easier way to think about it.
But
But that's
but Mark, don't you think we're all guilty of being the silent leader as we don't put it out there, and we think that the silent leader is we'll hold it in then for another time. So we're silent about it instead of just putting it out
I
and see
do.
what people think of
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
I think that we all have parts of all of this, and I think that the more we talk about it, the more it seems to me that circumstance has something to do with this, right? If you are feeling abundant, if you have plenty of money, if you have plenty of freedom in a relative sense, then these things are, it's easier to be another type of this person. But when you're struggling, and we all go up and down with this stuff, right? When you're particularly, or just feeling like you're struggling, this kind of thing becomes way more difficult. So I think circumstances do have something to do with it, but I think you got to be careful with that because that's external stuff that you don't have control over. You know, you
Yeah.
can reframe this anytime you want if you just hunker down with some self awareness and say, okay, what do I have control over and what am I just kind of making up in my head? What's the self worth?
Yep.
How do I tone down this self talk because it's negative right now?
Yep. Yep.
So the next one's
Right.
the starving artist. Yeah, this is movies and books are written about this all the time. So this person believes that real creativity must come with pain and that to be authentic you must suffer. It often
Interesting.
sees money as corrupting art. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't I don't struggle with this one as much because I don't consider myself an artist. You might have a different
Yeah.
opinion of that being an innovator and inventor.
But I agree with you. I think that these thoughts often are established by a movie or a book or something that we once saw, and we think that that there's something glamorous about being the starving artist. But it's very common. I don't really have the problem, but I think you'll see if somebody's super creative, they have all this art. Well, who was it? Was it Picasso? When he died, they found all these paintings that he was holding, and they became really valuable afterwards. But he had been painting for decades and then
It might have been him. I was thinking maybe
not
Van
being
Gogh.
paid for it and
Maybe
being
Van
silent about
Gogh.
it.
Yeah, I think it
It
was
was
Vincent Van Gogh
I
too.
think you're
Maybe
right.
both.
Yeah,
Maybe both
yeah,
of them.
yeah. But it was pretty common back in those days for these artists to have thousands and thousands of pieces of art that they never thought it was good enough. They were looking for perfection and they didn't ship it, so they were starving at the time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, pretty classic stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
It was
Shakespeare.
Gotti. Gotti was the one that was they found. I know it's because when I went to Spain, I went on this tour and explained his whole life. And at the end of his life, of course, the church was his legacy project. But when he died, he was poor, or he was like they thought he was a homeless guy. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
so
Interesting.
he never was what he is now that he's gone. But he was definitely the starving artist. He never made a lot of money, or he did and lost it all, which is pretty common. So
Yeah, there's a lot of stories about people like that.
absolutely,
So
yeah.
so number four is entitled The Invisible One. And the
Mhm.
description here is this person hides his magic and keeps its voice small, believing it's safer to stay unseen due to past experiences of judgment, rejection, or danger associated with visibility. Yeah, I can feel that. I can feel that, but as soon as I feel it, I also try desperately to dismiss it. I don't agree with it at all, but doesn't mean I haven't felt it and
Yeah.
won't feel it again.
Yeah. So back to rescripting, right? It's understanding that it's the time is now, and you're either playing small, and these are just more excuses you're coming up with that you have to one be self aware and then script your thoughts when you feel that resistance to push
Yeah,
through these areas.
I think there's an interesting angle on that rescripting, right? I think
Mhm.
we can work on that ourselves, like meditation, visualization, prayer, exercise, anything that's going to calm the mind, anything that's going to make us more clear in the way that we're thinking about things. Those are all things we can do for ourselves. But I've also experienced on more than one occasion in significant periods of self doubt, seeking out the opinions of people who know me and hearing over and over, Mark, what are you doing? The only person that doesn't think that you're doing that you can do this really well right now seems to be you. Everyone else speaks very highly of your capabilities in this particular area. And I think sometimes a little of that is necessary. A little of that is nice. The problem is you can't rely on that. You can't depend on that. I think for me, I have to master the art of doing it for myself. And then the accolades, for lack of a better phrase, from other people, they become icing on the cake. They're not what I need to dig myself out of that hole. That's been my
Mhm.
experience.
Well, I think that's what we're talking about today, right? It's all of our experiences. The question is, what do you do, and how do you unblock yourself from taking those next steps?
Yeah, yeah. It also just popped into my head how blissful ignorance is. I think that sometimes, having a childlike ignorance about life can be very handy because then you have a heightened appreciation of everything, and
Well, there's
sometimes,
something to say for having too much life experiences because you've had failures when you're young and you don't fear failure because you haven't had that much of it. You just do what's in front of you. You know,
hmm
there's a reason why in the NFL they have it's 20 to what is it 22 to 30-year old is the average age.
hmm hmm
Even at 30 in the NFL, you're overthinking things.
yeah.
And I think there's something to say for certain activities, especially athletics. But that's the
Yeah,
mind, body, spirit part of
overthinking
it.
is definitely a thing.
Mhm.
So, and the last one, and I've got a couple of little stories in mind, but the last one is called the overgiver. And
Mm.
this one is described as someone who gives, over explains, overgives, over delivers, and overworks. It stems from a place of unworthiness.
Mm.
Yeah, I felt like the word guilt was in there too, a little bit of feeling guilty. And
Mhm.
so you have this feeling of obligation to over deliver. Although they'll tell you, and the key to marketing, the key to sales is to under promise and over deliver. So I guess sometimes it depends on how you look at these words. But
Well,
yeah.
maybe it's not a marketing question; it's the thought. You think if you overgive that you'll be rewarded by somebody giving back, and that's just not how it goes a lot of the times. So again, back to just a thought. Some people will overcompensate by giving, thinking that somebody will say in kind, return
hmm
that, and then things will work out. But that really doesn't happen either because you didn't put a value on it or you weren't clear on what your request was back in return for that. Uh,
Well, I also think
I definitely see it.
there's an intention to it as well. I think that
Yes.
I feel better about serving other people when I don't have much of an expectation of anything in return. I'm doing it just specifically for the value that I'm hoping it provides for this person that seems to need my help at that particular moment, which could be anybody, but particularly
Mhm.
family members or friends that are struggling with something. It's like I'm not doing this. I'm not keeping track of this stuff. We're not keeping a tab, you know, who calls who first and who does what for who. I think that's a very slippery slope when you start thinking to yourself, well, I'm always the one leading with the give and this person's never coming back. And it's like, well, so what if that doesn't matter? What if
Yeah.
giving is just giving to be giving? Isn't that the best kind? So it's an
Yeah.
interesting kind of paradox for me.
Yeah. But not all can do that. Yeah, that
I
I
don't
think you
think
have to you
I
have to, you
think
have to
I
get
think
to a point
we
where
all
you're willing
suck
to
at
give.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's very difficult for me to say I'm going to just stick my neck out there to help you, and I'm never going to even hope that you do anything in return. I think that's a saintly kind of behavior. I don't claim to have that at all. I aspire to it, but it's a it's a difficult ask for me,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
So you said you had a story you wanted to share before we wrap up?
Well, I the story is kind of like what I've been doing for the last couple of years, and I've told you this a million times, so you might get a little bored with it, so I won't belabor it, but I've recognized more than any time in my life, and I know there are circumstances around it that I have control over a lot of this, right? And I haven't always felt that way. And I talk to you about my kind of biblical considerations, and you talk about your stoic considerations, and we both get levels of solace through going into those areas of thought. But I really think it's powerful, and I have evidence of it in my own life that if you can find a routine that allows you to go into a state of self awareness very intentionally, maybe for 30 seconds, maybe for 5 minutes, maybe for a half an hour. I don't know. Maybe all of those are possible. But if you can just get inside your own head and say, okay, I want to exercise control over this conversation. I don't want this conversation to be like somebody else's voice telling me what a loser I am or why I should be doubting myself or how scarce my situation might be. I want to get in there and I want to control that conversation. And as soon as I said control, I don't like that word, but I can exercise influence on this. This is not something that I have to accept as there's nothing I can do about this. And I think that these five categories, there's only one of them that I didn't really identify with, but I suspect I could find examples of identifying with all five. In my opinion, Jim, is that we're all probably predominantly one or two of these, and then less so of the other two or three. But I
Mhm.
think there's validity in the statement that this is not something that you have no control over. You can do something about this. You can become part of the conversation. And as soon as you do that, which I believe is self-awareness, then you can have an impact on the level of self-doubt that might creep into your life on a daily basis.
Mhm.
But it's much like exercise, like I say about everything. You can't do it on Monday and not do it on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I think what do you got to do at the gym? 3 days a week, 4 days a week?
No.
I think you got to do it
Yeah.
a few days a week for a consistent period of time. And then over time, what I've discovered is when I exercise control, when I enter this conversation and say, I want to participate in this conversation, things get brighter for me, things get more hopeful for me. So it was less of a story and more of an observation.
Well, speaking of observation, I was interested in this is the pregame. We were talking about our different frameworks. Like you said, your your faith, it gives you some framework, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
a storyline, or you have a following. You have I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you have some scripture that gives you some framework of how life plays out. At least an example of that is in, and please correct me if there's a better choice of words. In my case, like you said, even though I'm Catholic, I was baptized, I didn't follow the faith. And I do find that the writings of Stoics really are helpful, because they they've been talking about this for thousands of years. And particularly the Stoics that were in a position of power, of the when their focus was the better good of others, not for their ego. And I just find those writings to be very, very helpful about how life works. But I do think you have to have an overall framework, or you're going to default back to whatever whatever's in your mind. And this is being it comes back to being intentional, but also have an alignment of at least how you want your life to play out, in these remaining years. If you don't have that, I think we just, especially now, to your earlier point, there's so much information coming at us. You can easily get pushed in a direction that you don't belong, and then find yourself
Yeah.
not to be fulfilled, or in a place you want to be.
No, I think the framework's a good word. I think, and I don't take offense to that in the
Mm-hmm.
Catholic context at all. I think that it is a framework. I think the structure
Mm-hmm.
of Catholicism or any religion is the overriding benefit
Yeah.
to the religion. I think when we start pushing our belief systems on other people or insisting that if you don't do this, then you're wrong, I think that's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the structure of here's what mass is, here's what communion is, here's what prayer is, here are all the sacraments. There's a structure. Here are the players in the
Mm-hmm.
story. There's structure, and I think the Stoics do a very similar thing.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is, and I don't know this to be true or false, Jim, but I don't think the Stoics necessarily had a connection to God, but I believe
Mm-hmm.
some of them did.
That
Um,
is correct. That's my
yeah,
understanding as well.
yeah.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
don't think it was dismissive of God at all or any particular
Mhm.
religion. I think
Right.
they chose to frame it in
Yeah.
in a different structure.
On a high level, it was as much about human behavior,
Hmm.
accepting humans as they are, anticipating that, but then trying to create um, a better world to factor those into consideration for the good of others.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the tenets of the Catholic religion being forgiveness and sin is the expectation that we're all flawed, that we're capable of
Mhm.
sinning. Then and we need to be accepting of that, because then we can forgive that and move forward. So to me, those are very similar structures,
Right. And resisting the ego, right? The
the ego.
self-interest.
Yeah, the ego has no room in the Christian religions, I don't believe, and it certainly doesn't have any room in Stoicism. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a fascinating comparison. I don't claim to be educated enough to go too deep into that one, but it's a very
Mhm.
interesting conversation.
It is. So, all right, Mark, until next week.
Sounds good, Jim. Thanks,
All right.
man.
Thank you.
Peace.